Welcome to the Measure Pod with me, Daniel Perry-Reed. I am the Principal Analytics Consultant and Trainer at Measurelab, and joining me, as always, is Bhavik Patel, Director of Experimentation and Analytics at LeanConvert. This is episode 102, and we recorded this on the 28th of June, 2024. Now, just a quick admin update. We're back. If you've been listening to us before, we're back with a new set of episodes. Our plan going forward is to release them every fortnight. So if you're used to a weekly cadence, sorry, but we're going to go fortnightly and we're just going to keep going. We've got guests booked out. We've got conversations lined up. We've got some interesting stuff between myself and Bhav. We're not going to have any more breaks. So gone are the days of having a couple of episodes, then what turns out to be a couple of months off, but we're going to go fortnightly. So make sure to subscribe on any feed that you happen to be listening to us on. And of course, check us out on YouTube over on the Measurelab account if you want to see our lovely faces. But enough of that. Bhav, we've just recorded our first episode back. And yeah, I thought it was fascinating. We actually talked through one of your blog posts. Data is a journey, not a destination. What did you think?
Yeah, I think in the spirit of the blog post, we actually took a journey to get to that content, that topic of discussion. So I think it was a nice episode. I 100% stand by the metaphor of treating your data as a road trip and not as this destination that it's a mad rush to get to. And I think as we were talking about it, we were exploring some of the reasons why people might see it as a destination, and actually the pitfalls of seeing it as a destination means that you stop and appreciate the journey that you're on. So hopefully anyone who's listening will enjoy it, and I hope it'll resonate with everyone as well, and get people to shift away from this mindset of we need to be this super tech smart AI advanced organization, and just appreciate for data what it is. It's only as good as the people using it, and it doesn't need to be like AI level. It just needs to be valuable.
And of course, content warning for any data or analytics engineers out there. You know what we mean when we get there. And of course, if that is you and you have a thought about what we talk about, then please get in touch. There is a form to communicate with me and Bhav in the show notes. Actually love to have you on. I think we've set ourselves up the task of having an episode with a bunch of analytics and data engineers. So please feel free to get in touch. Bhav, what's going on? Anything to plug? What's new with you?
Yes, if you're listening to this episode before the 16th of July, we have got Crap Talks 26, 25. I've actually lost track coming up. So please do come along. It's going to be a fantastic evening. We've got a couple of speakers already booked in who are going to be great. And as per usual, the networking aspect of it is a big part of why our attendees keep coming. So come along. That's the main thing I wanted to plug.
Awesome. And that's the London Crap, right?
That is the London Crap Talks event. Sorry. Yes, that's correct.
Awesome. I think in terms of recording, we've just missed to plug the Manchester Crap, but it goes on. Make sure you follow them on Meetup just to catch the next one as well. And for me, I'm actually running a bit of a survey at the moment. So my plan is there's a lot of thinking I've been doing over the last couple of weeks around the world of analytics as it's changing my role in that as well, which is maybe a conversation for another time and a future topic maybe. But really just want to hear from anyone that works in the world of analytics. Please go to the show notes, and I allow you to pause this episode and go do this. I allow you to do that. But there's a quick feedback form, there's a quick survey that I'd love for you to fill in. And I just want to get an idea of what we define analytics as. So what skills do analytics people need? And what is analytics today? Now, we've all got a slightly different perception. We've already had We've already had a bunch of responses, and they're all really fascinating. And there's some really interesting themes coming out of that. But my intention is to publish this at some point in the future. But I want to give it a couple of weeks so that anyone listening to this and other people could contribute their thoughts. So if you're in the world of analytics, please jump into the show notes. There's a quick form. If you follow me on the socials, you'll see it on LinkedIn and other things as well. I'm sure I'll be talking about it loads more over the next couple of weeks. Last thing to mention is, as well as the links to everything we discuss, and of course, my plug of that survey and the Crap Talks meetup. You'll find ways to connect with me and Bhav on LinkedIn, etc. in the show notes, as well as the companies we work for, LeanConvert and Measurelab. Be sure to check them out, follow them, or do whatever you need to do. Everything is over there. So the last thing to say is let's get to it. Enjoy the show. So we're back recording an episode, Bhav. Welcome back. Good to see you. It's actually been a minute since I've seen you, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of you at Crap next week, or whenever this comes out. It might have been in the past. So Bhav, what's been going on? I dread to think how many weeks / maybe even months now since we recorded the last episode, but we're back into the new season or the new format, the new flow. How have you been? What you've been up to? What's new with you?
Oh, I don't know. Hi, Dan. Nice to see you as well. I've missed you. I've missed our conversation. So I'm looking forward to talking again more on these podcasts, having guests, and meeting people again through Crap Talks. It has been a while. What have I been up to? Mostly work. I've been trying to keep my head down, crack on with some work, solving some really interesting client problems, which has been fun. Been spending a lot of time with the family, with the kids. So that's a big part of my life. And I've been trying to write more. And whilst I end up writing, I never end up publishing it. So what you see on like socials is kind of like snippets of kind of like bigger thoughts that I just haven't had time to like fully articulate into proper blog posts. So sometimes I feel like it's just a snippet of all the things I want to say. How about you? What have you been up to?
Well, I've been obviously reading the stuff you share where it pops up in my feed, but actually the conversation of the day of this episode is going to be on a blog post you shared, which all links will be in the show notes if anyone wants to go in and read the full article. But obviously you're using ChatGPT to rewrite it to sound really intelligent and summarize it, right? That's what you're doing?
Oh, you know you're gonna like you poke the bear here. You know I don't do that. I really don't like using ChatGPT. So a few years back, I actually joined a writing club within this writing club, the way it works is you write some posts or you write some content, and then you share it to a community of proper writers who will then critique it, give you feedback, give you suggestions on how to make it more punchy. So I actually learned how to write. I spent myself, and I mean, I guess there's never really you never like graduate from learning how to write, but I've spent a lot of time learning how to write what you see on my blog posts on LinkedIn, everything from sentence structure, complexity of sentences. I aim for, there's something called a reader score on an app called the Hemingway app. Initially, when I was writing, I would write my post and put it onto the Hemingway app, and it would score it. And what you're aiming for is you're aiming for a reading score about between 6 to 8, and the reading score represents like grade level. So you want to write a 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade level. And I was writing at what was more like complex in university level. So it wasn't, and that's not a brag. Sorry, it's too complex, and I was using long sentences. I wasn't pausing, I wasn't breaking, and there was a lot of words stuffed in that I didn't need to. So through this writing community, I learned how to write for impact. And what you see on things like LinkedIn and on my blog posts, that's a manifestation of sort of like a few years of like continuously writing, learning how to write, and retraining my brain in terms of like how I write about this. So it's not ChatGPT, although I'm convinced LinkedIn probably thinks I'm using ChatGPT, and it's the algorithm is kind of like down, marking my scores down because it thinks I'm writing at ChatGPT level. But no, I do use it. Like, I mean, I'm not saying I don't use ChatGPT, but I use it more for just like, hey, let's just correct the grammar if I've made a spelling mistake or something like that.
Yeah, amazing. I knew that, and I just wanted to poke the bear. So thanks for humoring me. But yeah, for sure. I mean, it must be so. As someone that really struggles writing, and I spelling and grammar has never been my forte, and let alone kind of like reading is actually a struggle, but as well because of all that stuff. So I think it's all tied together. I can't imagine learning and doing like a professional or personal development to a point where you are good at something, and then this machine comes along and basically is trained on the stuff that you've learned and does a similar thing. So not saying that it's the same from a reader's perspective, but from the machine perspective, it identifies it as similar, and then you might get flagged. It must be infuriating, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean that's my assumption. Of course, that's me just being sensitive about the fact that I don't seem to get the same reach on my content as I used to. For what it's worth, I think everyone should learn how to write, and I don't mean in the like a very like, hey, go and spend like 50 hours a month learning how to write, but just writing is such a great exercise in formulating your thoughts, formulating your ideas. I know I've mentioned this to you before, one of my life hacks, and I said I probably wouldn't share it, but I think I will. When I'm speaking publicly, like conferences or things like that, whilst it sounds like I'm giving a really good talk and what I'm saying is really flowing, it's actually, I don't think it's natural. I'm a really bad speaker. I really struggle to speak when I'm talking about topics that I've not really written about before. So what I do is I write a lot, and I think a lot about what I'm writing about, and that really helps me create the sentences, and I use them as like a go-to when I'm talking about topics I've studied a lot. So it's not like I'm this is like a conscious stream of what you're hearing. A lot of it is stuff that I've kind of like drummed in, practiced, rehearsed over and over again through the act of writing, reading, and thinking. So it comes out as a very coherent sentence. But otherwise, I'm a terrible public speaker. I'm surprised you guys asked me to join the podcast.
Well, that's it. Maybe you've rehearsed it so well that we think that you're a great public speaker. And for what it's worth, however you get there, the destination is the same. It's a good talk. It's a good public speaking. And hopefully our listeners agree that, you're good to have on the podcast. So much so that we kicked Dara. No, I'm just kidding off. We miss you, Dara, if you're listening.
I miss you too, Dara.
I tell you what's fascinating. What have I been up to? I learned something about myself during this break, and it's fascinating. I've been talking to everyone I possibly can about it. So have you heard of a thing called aphantasia? No, it's weird. I'm new to this. So I was running a training session via Brighton SEO. I do the Google Analytics training there. And afterwards, there's drinks vouchers and we all hang out at the bar. And I was meeting and chatting with a bunch of other training people and also trainers, all sorts of different courses. And then we randomly got onto this conversation with a couple of other trainers about like teaching styles, methodologies and stuff like that, and using slides and aids to kind of explain complex situations. And I went through what I do using Google Sheets and sort of drawing stuff as well. And it transpired that this trainer has this thing called aphantasia. Now, aphantasia is a spectrum like anything, but essentially it's saying that you have no or very little visual memory. So if someone says to you, close your eyes, imagine you're on a beach, on the sand in your toes, waves lapping up against the rocks and stuff, there's no pictures going on. I'm not a visual thinker. Like I don't have a visual memory. So what it also affects is things like if I'm not looking at you, Bhav, and someone asks me to describe what you look like, I'll be like, dark hair and glasses. That's as far as I can get without looking at you. I actually have no image of you to refer back. So I can learn characteristics and features, but I'm not looking at a picture of you in my brain. And so we kind of transpired. And then I've been talking to everyone about this, and it's actually affected a lot of stuff, what I'm kind of like maybe in hindsight going back and applying and attributing to this aphantasia. But it's the complete opposite, I think, of what you just said, which is I don't rehearse anything, and I think and speak and draw out loud. So because I can't form stuff visually in my brain. So if I'm working something out, if I'm thinking something through, it's all like in front of me. I have to draw it down because I can't map it out in my brain visually. And so for me, like when I do a talk like the last Measure Camp last September, I deliberately didn't do any preparation before I started talking, because often when I start talking, it happens. And the less preparation I do, the more preparation I do, unless I'm really preparing, like running a training course, for example, I end up thinking like I'm building a script, and I end up getting I don't allow myself to deviate from that, and I'm almost like reading out a rehearsed script, which actually is kind of detrimental to the way my brain flows and works and reacts. So yeah, anyway, I'm the complete opposite. I do the opposite of what you just said. But
that's fascinating, because I am not like that. Like I won't memorize the script, but when I will prep, even if I'm doing prep to the last minute. So for example, I was speaking at a conference last week. 2 weeks ago, David Mannheim, who those of you guys that know, so he's a past guest. He was supposed to be speaking at a conference that we both at. Unfortunately, he had some health issues, and he had appendicitis. Hopefully you're feeling better, David. But he asked me to step in last minute, so I did, and I built the talk the night before, effectively. And even though it was last minute preparation, I rehearsed in my head as I was building each slide what I wanted to say, and I even had every single joke planned out. So a lot of my jokes for these in that situation were all mapped. I knew exactly what joke I was going to say, what personalization joke I was going to make, what joke I was going to make about product management. Everything like that was roughly mapped out in my head, so that when I got to the slide, I don't have the script, but I know roughly the start, the middle, and the end of the joke. So wow. It's really hit. I've never heard of aphantasia. Yeah, but
Well, nor did I before I found out. I think the simple test that was given to me is close your eyes and think of an apple. Now describe what you see. And then my response was something like, what do you mean? What do I see? Like I can describe an apple. I know what an apple looks like. I'm like, it's the way, okay, for our audience and for you, Bhav, as well, the way I have explained it to my colleagues at work is that imagine it like a cloud database, right? And I can recall information at will. So I can recall information of what an apple is like, and the descriptions around it, or the variety of what can happen with apples and stuff. But there's no image of it. Like it's not it's not a dashboard. I'm not looking at stuff. I'm just recalling information as I need it. So that's the way I've described it to my colleagues.
I mean, this is fascinating. We'll definitely have to talk about this some more next time we're having a beer or something together.
Well,
because if you said to me like pink lady apple, I can visualize where it is in the supermarket. I can see the little sticker on it. I can see myself picking up. I can see the shine on it. You know, like it's just I'm blown away right now. Like I've never heard about this, so it's really interesting.
Look, this is fun, but let's talk about what we're here to talk about, and maybe we can come back to this another time. So we are here to talk actually about, speaking of writing and our approaches, actually one of the blogs that you've written. Now, for our listeners, if you're listening and you're still listening at this point, you don't have to have read the blog from Bhav, but if you want to, it's a couple of minutes, maybe 3-5 minute read. And it will be linked to in the description. It's a really fascinating discussion, and it's the title kind of does a lot of the explanation of what you go into, but it's called Data is a Road Trip, Not a Destination. And I think maybe most of us can relate to this, or can identify a scenario or a previous experience where this has actually been the cause of a problem, or maybe in hindsight it could have been differently. For those that haven't read it, give us a bit of an overview, a quick summary. Why did you write this? What drove you to write this down as a piece of content?
I think I was doing some client work, and it occurred to me that when people think about data, especially and I don't mean the data people, I think the data people instinctively know that it's not a wham bam, thank you ma'am, done type situation. This is a journey like we're always going to go on. But yet when it's pitched to leadership around, hey, we need investment in data, it's kind of pitched that this is what we want to get to. And that pitch and that destination is what usually drives the funding and things like that. And then you see frustration within organizations with like, well, why haven't we got there yet? Like, why is this taking so long? I know in the past when I've asked data engineering for, to help me do some data modeling so that I can have a table of sessionized or a user table or something like that, it's taken months, even even a year or something to even get them to prioritize it. And it's always because they're doing something else, and all blah blah blah, all of these things. And it occurred to me that when we think about data and the way we talk about data, it's always pitched as this is a place we want to get to, this data utopia, and it's not, right? And there isn't a final destination for data. It's a journey we go on, and I started thinking about sort of like what are the milestones you have to hit, and for some reason in my brain those milestones became checkpoints, and I started thinking about it. Actually, it's kind of like a road trip that we go on, so you could. And the other thing is, like, when you pitch it as a destination, you have to everyone needs to come with you. You don't, right? You start off on the road trip as, maybe 2, 3, 4 people or however many people. You get to your first destination. There you might need some support from data engineering. Then you move on and you might need some support from someone else. And you keep going to these new destinations, and each destination brings new sites, it brings new culture, it brings new people, and you can stay somewhere. So, let's say, for example, you get to a point where you're like, I really like the view from here. It gives us everything we need. We don't need to keep chasing that final destination. We can take a break here for a little while. Let's take a data break. And we can sit here for like a month or 2 months. We're getting everything we need. And only when we realize that, we've soaked up enough of this culture and we'd really love to see what's next, and, move to a different country, you kind of think, okay, well, what does the next phase look like? And in many ways, this journey represents the maturity of an organization in terms of its pursuit of data excellence. But when we pitch it as a destination, we're forgetting that it's going to be a long road. We don't need to take everyone with us right from the word go. So, sorry, that's not quite an elevator pitch, but it's really around this idea that you're going on a journey. You might start off with a handful of people. You meet different people along the way. You can stop at wherever you want to go. You can go back if you need to, right? And say, actually, we were okay here. We really liked it. And then you keep moving forward if you really want to. So that was the premise of it. And each stop is a different place. So I think in my post, I wrote about the first stop being Measurement Strategy Village. And Measurement Strategy Village is where you start to plan, like, what do you want the data to do? What are the metrics you need? What are the measurement frameworks you need to put in place? What does success look like? Things like that. So it's, each one of these, each destination on the road trip represents a milestone in your otherwise long data journey that you're going to go on.
And this is the immediate thing that I related to, and I think there's one part specifically of that I want to drill into, because I think this is what I've been thinking about more and more so recently, which is the idea of you might enjoy the view and you might stay there or go back a little bit. You might go on a road trip and you might be like, well, actually, this is better than the destination, or the destination is too complex. I'm bringing it back to the data world now, but often there are infinite numbers of maturity frameworks and assessments and scales that you can be assessed on. And I want to shout out, we recently hired a guy called Mark McKenzie at Measurelab, and he's written this really incredible book called Your Data is Fucked for Marketers. So it's a really good book. I'll stick a link in the description. I don't get any commission from it, but it's a really good book. If you're in marketing and you're in data, it's a really fascinating book. But one thing that I was chatting to Mark about, which is something again that I might not disagree with, but I think is maybe a slight improvement, is that maturity framework that he's created in there is numbered. And I find numbering something is quite not problematic, but it makes us think of, oh, you don't want to be level 5, but you're a level 3. You need to be a level 4. 4 is bigger than 3. And actually this process, whatever frameworks you're creating, as soon as they become numbered, it's like an expectation or an assumption that you want to be a higher number. And actually, this is something that I've been, again, chatting with Mark about, and what I identified in that post from you, Bhav, is that it actually doesn't matter. You can stay somewhere that actually might be better for you in the long run, and enjoying that view in a long time. Maybe in the future things change and you go forward. Maybe you go backwards, but it's not really back, it's just changing. And I think it's about identifying what works and what the value is, I suppose, and not always chasing something next. If you're always chasing the next thing, you're never enjoying where you are, and you're always thinking about like, oh, but we're not here yet. But we are here, and that was better than where we were before. But we're always thinking what we don't have rather than what we do have.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with you more. I think this I don't know where it comes from, this pressure to be AI driven and, you know, like have like the latest tech stack and what have you. And again, a lot of this was driven by some work I was doing for some clients, and you know, they're a really nice client, but they're not ready for AI. You know, you'd think that, you know, they're a very profitable business, but they're not ready for things like AI. So right now we started off by doing this measurement framework, and again, a lot of this was triggered by a lot of this work I'm doing, and it really got me thinking about, everyone has their own journey, but one isn't better than the other, right? Like, you don't need to have Google level of data maturity. You know, you can be where you are if you're profitable and you're getting the insights you need. If you then reach a point where like, I'm not quite getting what I need, then you might consider the next destination on your journey. And I really like your point about numbering things, because you are right. When, you know, we see these maturity curves, and the way that they're described is, you know, 5 is bigger than 4, 4 is bigger than 3, 3 is bigger than 2, and 2 is bigger than 1. And in sort of like the data world, we would classify those type of numbers as continuous numbers, in the sense that there is an element of measurability against it, and you can do calculations off it, like, you know, like 1 is bigger than the other. But actually it's not, right? It's like they're categorical variables, like, you know, being 5'5" versus 5'8" doesn't mean anything. One is taller than the other, but doesn't mean, like, you know, it's better or worse than anything like that. And this is excuse me. And this kind of view that everyone has to get to 5 is kind of, I think it's perpetuated a lot by leaders wanting to show that their organization is like, you know, like really moving forward, and, you know, we're really data driven, and, you know, we're really tech first, and all of these kind of things. And actually you don't need to be. It's like, if you're doing well with what you have, hey, let's enjoy the view in this place that we're at right now. And only when we've maximized everything we can. And I say this about technology. Technology is one of my biggest gripes. When I see people chasing newer and newer tech stack, we need to do this platform, we need to move to this platform, we need to upgrade our data warehouse. It's like, well, are you getting like 90%, 100% value out of your platforms that you have now? If the answer is no, why do you think a new tech platform is the solution? I think maybe you and I have spoken about this in the past before as well. But, you know, when you see companies saying like, hey, we need to move to this product analytics tool or this thing or something like that, it's like, well, if you're not getting the support with the technology you have now, if people aren't using the technology you have now, if you're not utilizing its full functionality with what you have now, why do you think that moving to something bigger, better, shinier is going to make any difference, right? What you have isn't a tech problem, you have a culture problem. You know, allocate those resources, get usage up to its maximum level, squeeze everything you can in terms of feature usage of the platform you have. And then when you reach that point, you're kind of reaching the end of like, hey, you know what? We've spent a long time in this destination. We've seen everything there is to see. We want to move on and we want to see what else the world has to offer. Then you're ready to move on, in my opinion.
Now, for our long-term listeners, it's no secret that I like to run training courses all around Google Analytics, Tag Manager, and everything in between. Check out a full list of courses over at measurelab.co.uk/training to see all the courses and workshops that we have available. Everything from learning Google Analytics 4 to Google Tag Manager, data visualization, and short-form workshops to cover small specific areas of interest, such as user-provided data, generative AI for data analysis, as well as lots of other stuff. That's measurelab.co.uk/training for all the details, or you can click the link in the show notes, or if you're watching this, scan this QR code now. I still religiously refer back to Avanash's 90-10 rule with this kind of stuff, and saying that, you know, when you're investing in, let's say, just marketing, for example, if you're investing in marketing, I think the technology is the 10 and then the people and the process is the 90. So if you're not currently doing that, spending more on technology is not going to solve your problem. Having more, we have this conversation at work all the time around, should we go to GA360, for example? And I was just like, well, okay, if you're happy to spend anywhere from 3 to 10 grand a month on technology, what are you going to do differently? Like, how are you going to make better decisions to earn more than that much money back to make it a kind of profit center rather than just a cost? Technology won't solve anything. It just ups limits and expands features. Like, it's not going to make you money. And actually what you do with it is going to make money. I'd rather have, you know, server logs and make a good decision, which earns you your 10x return on this thing, than introducing Adobe Analytics or another piece of software, or, you know, the amount of times we've introduced heat mapping or scroll tracking, and it's just like, well, that's just data. It's just sitting there. It's just costing you, you know, page load time and the license for this tool, but it's not doing anything for you.
I'm gonna steal that. You said something there which I love, and I'm gonna steal it. I'm gonna write a blog post about it. I might even give you some credit for it, but I'm gonna pass it off as an original thought. You said if you're gonna spend 5-10 grand on this new technology, what are you gonna do different? I think that is such a powerful question to ask.
You know, at the beginning, we were talking about this aphantasia thing and how I speak out loud and I process information by speaking. I think that I immediately forgot that I just said that. And so it sounds really intelligent, actually, in hindsight. But it also means that I can enjoy listening to this episode back because I forgot everything that I said. So I like, you know, that's always a fun thing for me. So just kind of attributing it back to this aphantasia thing.
Oh, I've written it down. So if you don't hear it back on this episode, you're going to see it regurgitated on LinkedIn.
Well, let's I have one question prepared before this episode, only one. So here it is. How can you identify if you are working with or in a destination mindset? And then how, I suppose the continuation of that question is, how then do you work towards adjusting it to a journey, a mindset rather than destination?
Oh, that's a good question. I like questions that I haven't been prepped in advance with, because it means I'm forced to think on the spot. And then that skill I tap into of memorized sentences and like thoughts. I'm going to take a second. We'll probably cut this into a very short time period. I think I know how I'm going to answer this question. I'm going to say, if you're a destination-driven organization versus a road trip organization, when your engineering team or your data team are too rigid. If you're rigid in your approach, if you have something that's 12 months down the line and you have no way of getting things in that are important and prioritizable, I'm not saying that obviously you should prioritize everything that comes in, but if there is no flex, if there is no ability to say, actually, you know what, we've got this new challenge that's just come up, how do we adapt to this challenge? If there is no movement in your ability to adapt, I would say you're a destination-driven organization, and you should consider being a bit more road trip-driven. Now, I know this is kind of like flies in the face of like software engineering principles and what have you, because, you know, people will just, you know, what's the point of having a road, you know, like we're going to get mixed up in analogies here, like a roadmap, right? If you keep allowing yourself to like pivot and change direction, you'll never get to where you want to get to anyway. So the idea isn't that you are completely flexible, but if there is no movement, there is no flex, you know, you've got your next 6 to 12 months planned out to the point where actually adding anything onto into your data backlog is impossible, I would say you're a destination driven one. That's one. The second one I would say is, I think it goes back to maybe that if you're not squeezing everything you can out of your platform, and you're constantly changing and technology, and you're constantly looking at new shiny toys, I think in this instance what you have is you are still chasing a destination because you're trying to get to somewhere, and you're like not giving the technology you have a chance to be used to its max capacity. And you're like, oh, let's try this, didn't work, let's move on, try this, didn't work, let's move on, try this, didn't work. I think this is a bit too destination driven as well, because you're not stopping to take the sights, and like allowing your program, your tool, your technology, your people to mature. Like, you need to spend some time in a destination, and then before you move on. So not destination, in a checkpoint before you move on. So that was my unprepped answer, and I hate unprepped answers, but I think
I love it. Now I know this. Now I know this. Every episode is going to have an element of this. We're not going to put it in that shared doc we have beforehand. But I think that's a great answer. And I'm going to say this to camera. You can quote me on this. Most likely, 9 times out of 10, a new piece of technology will not solve your problems. Like, it is not a solution to something. Technology won't solve them. You will. Doing something with it will. And I think that's the key thing. So there we go. That will be one of the quotes that I'll put on the show notes page probably. So I think this is a really fascinating subject. This idea that, let's see if we can put it into context around the world of analytics where we work. So obviously we can't share anything specific in terms of clients we're working with and stuff, but is there any specific examples that you could maybe anonymize or generalize around that actually identifies this, or maybe a challenge that came up because they're a destination mindset?
I don't think this is based, this idea of this road trip, it came about through clients who were in early stages, as opposed to they've been this destination mindset. And I realized that because I was doing some work and I was prepping for this, we were doing a measurement framework workshop. So we went to see them in Croatia. And as I was prepping for it, it was really nice because these clients, they're absolutely wonderful, and they're really open to the idea. They want to be data driven, but it's kind of like, what does that look like? How do we become data driven? So we started off with the idea that, like, hey, look, let's build a measurement framework to help you get started. They don't really employ they don't have a proper data platform like a Looker Studio or AI or anything like that. So right now they have a database. That it's a SQL database. They have GA, they have Full Story, and they use everything else is in Google Sheets. So there isn't a BI platform, right? And then even in terms of the data, I was talking to the founder, the CEO of the company, and he really wants people to understand why they're making decisions. And it was a really, really interesting conversation. Probably one of the best conversations I've ever had with the CEO, because sometimes what happens is he was in situations where people would be coming to him and talking to him about, hey, we did this campaign and it went really well. And he would ask, well, how do you know it did well? And they didn't really have, they would say, well, sales went up. Like, well, did they go up because of the campaign, or did they go up just because they went up? And it was through that conversation I realized that, what I've got here is I've got this ripe opportunity to work with a CEO who understands that there is somewhere he wants to get to, but he's not quite sure what that would look like, and actually trying to present him a full end-to-end diagram of what their data infrastructure would look like, from data sources to data warehouse to BI platforms to reporting layers and then outputs. This was never going to be something that I was going to be able to like get buy-in from. So instead, I took this approach. Was like, okay, well, let's start off with the first thing. Let's define what good measurement would look like for your company. And I look back to companies I've worked at, and it was this. I realized that there was, when I was working with a data and I won't lie, it's the data engineering team that has triggered this, because getting time with data engineering is one of the hardest things that analysts ever have to deal with, because for some strange reason, data engineers are working on everything other than the needs of the analysts, who are the primary consumers of that data. And it blew my mind. It's like, hang on, like me and my team are the primary consumers of your everything we do is with your data. No one else uses this data. So what is it that you're working on that is so much more important that that is taking precedence over the needs of your primary stakeholders? Like, could you imagine you as an analyst, me as an analyst, working with us, like, let's say the CMO comes up and says, hey Dan, I really need some, we've just launched these massive campaigns, we're about to pump more money into it than we've ever pumped into it before, we really need some help from some analysis. And you're like, oh yeah, sorry, I can't do it. I've got this roadmap that I'm working on, and it's some stuff that it's going to be around, like, building out great reports for everyone, and we're going to democratize reporting. And it's like, okay, but yes, that's important, but I'm your stakeholder and I really need support to be able to make sure that we spend this money wisely. And that realization really, like, that's when I knew I was working in rigid organizations and that were destination focused.
I think there's a really good example that I can come up with for what kind of ties into this. And when I've had a lot of conversations recently, so there's a big, in my world, in the marketing analytics world, there's been a big shift with the move to GA4. Now, you don't have to like it or love it or hate it, but you don't have to be using it, but it has shifted things because it's Google, it's big and well adopted. And one of the big things that shifted is that idea of first-party data. It's happening in the world of marketing in general, but storing your analytics data in BigQuery with an event schema. I know, revolutionary, right? But Google Analytics 4 has introduced that to many new people. And a lot of the solutions that we were used to experiencing, like building dashboards in Looker Studio for free, is now, oh, we have to use BigQuery. We have to use BigQuery. This is the thing that comes up time and time again. And I think what this does is this, as an industry, as a marketing industry, I think that it's still relatively new to introduce the idea of databases, data warehouses, data lakes, the whole cloud infrastructure outside of the kind of engineering or analytics teams. And so I think what's happening now is they're like, okay, well, here's the destination. We need a data warehouse. But that's not what you want. That's a means to do something. That's a means to an end. It's a tool. But actually, people are coming and saying we need a data warehouse. And that's just like, well, that is like saying I need a car. It's like, yeah, but if I gave you any car, you're probably going to be like, oh, not that car. I wanted a blue one, or I wanted one with 4 wheels. Why did you only give me one with 3? So there's lots of stuff there where it's how long's a piece of string? I need a data warehouse. And I think that the journey there is actually really important because, storing your own data, governing it, joining it, using and activating first-party data is really important. But right now, if you've just got a tag in Tag Manager to power Google Ads and that's it, maybe it's too much for you. Maybe there's a journey there, like the road trip, and actually maybe you don't get there. Maybe you sit there with a tool like Supermetrics or Funnel and just push it into a dashboard and be happy. Maybe you don't need to own your own data infrastructure and pay for that. Oh wait, I have to pay for this? This is new. Oh, and how much is maintenance of this? How many people do I need to hire? It's a journey. And actually that's part of that journey, whereas people often come to us and say, look, we need X, and it's because they've been told or they've heard this word or they know that Google is shouting about first party data. So yeah, it's just another example in our world where we're coming at this at the moment and we're seeing more and more of these conversations, and it's really hard actually to, especially in a new business call, when we're speaking to people that we don't have an engagement with or a relationship with, or we don't know very well, ultimately is what I'm saying there. It's really hard to say that's not what you need. You need to go on a journey and we can help you with that, but actually I can't tell you what that looks like just yet because I need to figure it out with you. We need to figure this out. So, it's a really hard sell, actually, this idea of the journey, because the destination is tangible. It's fixed, or at least in their mind, it's fixed. It's a product. It's a thing. Whereas actually selling a journey is bloody impossible. Well, it's not impossible, just really hard.
No, and you're right. But I think, and again, it comes down to like these, like going back to this maturity framework of like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's when you've got your eyes set on 5, right? You miss all the pleasures of 2 and 3 and 4. Like going on that journey to, if you're a 1 and you're set on 5, right? You never really appreciate how hard it was to get to 2. And that actually just spending a bit of time at 2 is probably going to be enough. And most people get what they need at 2, maybe even at 3. And you mentioned how long is a piece of string? Like, I need a data warehouse. You're so right. And again, I swear to God, I was having like PTSD moments there when you were talking about like building a data warehouse, because I've seen it, companies I've worked at where they it's like, okay, the engineering team is working on, and I feel like this is becoming a data engineering bashing episodes, and maybe I just need to get it off my chest to make me feel better. But data engineering teams are like chasing this perfect data warehouse situation at the detriment of everything else. I don't, I never specifically name drop any of my previous companies, but because I don't, they were all great in many ways. They all had some problems in many ways. But I'm gonna, I talk about Hopin for example. When I was at Hopin, the data engineering team were great. They were really helpful, and they were building reports. But at no point did they recognize that we need to do the analytics right now to be able to understand how the company's growing, because everything was happening so fast, and they were chasing APIs, and they were chasing like, hey, we need to get this data into the front end so our customers can use it, and blah blah blah, all these type of things. And I remember all of the difficult conversations, because it's not been that long, right, with the VP of engineering, the engineering directors, and they were constantly pushing back on me on, like, Bhav, like, we this isn't something we can do right now. We can do it next quarter, and maybe it's my fault. I saw some red flags, and whilst I did flag them, I thought they were, we probably should have. I probably should have pushed harder to our CEO and the MDs and all of the the powers that be to really say, look, forget about getting this data, which is nice to have, into the front of the platform where customers can use it. They already have something there, right? Like we're not a data product, right? We don't sell. It's like Fitbit and MyFitnessPal and Strava. These are technically data products, right? You inject data into them through when customers are like going for a run, or they're eating the food and they're entering all their calories and all that stuff. These are data products. Hopin was not a data product, yet there was parts of the platform which gave data to a customer, but we treated the entire thing as a data product. And that came at the detriment of me and my team not being able to get what we needed to be able to do analysis. And whilst the engineer was really great, if you asked them like, hey, look, I just need this small thing, they would do it. But we should have been focusing on like, how do we make analytics, analysis, reporting the thing that everyone gets hold of, rather than focusing so heavily on this one niche aspect where organizers can see how many people turned up to their conference and how many people sent messages and things like that. Like, yeah, it's a nice to have, but they don't need it that badly. So yeah, when you're talking about kind of like, how long is this piece of string? Yeah, I reckon if I could go back in time and ask all of the data engineering teams, like, what are you working towards? I don't think I'd get one. I don't think I'd get a straight answer.
Well, I think, there we go, we've teed up another episode where I think we need to invite some engineers on and have this conversation again and get their perspective or opinion or situation, actually. I think that would be really interesting. So let's mark that one down in the sheet and let's get that in the calendar. All right, well, Bhav, I think we're at a good point to wrap up our first episode. I just wanted to get a really nice little chat with you in as our first kind of like new series of podcasts in. We do have guests lined up. We've got some amazing people that we've been talking to, and we're going to be getting them in. But I thought I'd do something slightly different and maybe even put you on the spot again, but just to wind us down and wrap us up a little bit. Is there anything that you have read, seen, or listened to recently, work-related, that you found interesting and would like to plug or share?
I've written something that it's not quite work related, but it was a bit of fun, and it's called I can't remember exactly how many there were, but I think it was like the top 20 movies and TV shows that every analyst and data person should watch. So if you do get a chance, I'm sure we'll put it into the show notes, but I highly recommend this IMDb list of movies I put together, and I genuinely think that every analyst, data person in the world should watch this collection of sort of like 20, 25, I think, I can't remember exactly how it was, movies and TV shows. So that's my plug. Read this blog post, watch the movies. It's a fun one as well.
Amazing. I like that one. I thought it was a really, really cool little post, and I liked how Tetris was up there in the top 5, and I really liked that film. I thought it was a really good film. And I suppose it's not fair if I don't plug as well. I am going to share a blog post also, but this is a theme that is coming up time and time again nowadays, which is, well, first of all, I'll plug the blog post. This is a blog post by Dana DiTomaso, and it's titled "Marketing Analytics Data is Wrong. can it be fixed? And it was such a clickbaity, hooky title. I had to read it. But the fundamental aspect of this is not just, it does go into the reasons of like, cookie consent and ad blockers and browsers. Yes, of course, reasons why data is non-complete and difficult and not perfect. But what I found really fascinating about this post is right at the end, towards the end, it goes through actionable things of how can we adjust things to use partial data. So advice on changing fixed numbers to percentages in your dashboards and using the same data, but when you're looking at, for example, from Google Analytics, total users, total sessions, and then you've got the percent change year on year, switch it round. Have the percent change year on year as the big number, and then have the actual number underneath as a smaller number. And these tactical, tangible ways of working with partial data that I thought was absolutely fascinating. And it's been something I've been thinking about for a long time, and I just love seeing written down and people thinking about the same stuff. So big plug there. Obviously, all these links will be in the show notes. One last question for you, Bhav. I haven't really figured out how to phrase this question, but I thought it's something that maybe we could ask our guests as well. What's something that maybe the people listening and people in the industry probably don't know about you?
Okay, this is a fun one because it's a recent hobby I've taken up. So back in January, I had this old watch that my wife got me when we were at university together. So we're going back about like 20 odd years or something like that. I'm very old, and I've had it for, it was a really nerdy watch. Like we were both young, both working part time, and it had on the dial, instead of saying 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, it had like the square root of 144, things like, really mathematical. Like, it was a real mathematical nerd watch that I loved because I was doing my maths degree at the time. Anyway, fast forward 20 years and I still have the watch, but it wasn't working. The strap was broken and it was just starting to, it'd seen better days. So what I did was I ordered a watch repair kit off of Amazon, and I ordered some straps and I fixed it and I put a new battery into it. It was really nice and I really enjoyed it. I found it very therapeutic. So I started doing it more and more. I started trying to get hold of like broken, or not so much broken, I'm not a horologist, but I started getting watches that just needed a battery, a strap, a bit of a polish and a clean. And this was 6 months ago or 7 months ago. And I now have 400 watches. I only had one. I now have about 400 watches. They're not like tags or Omegas. I've been learning about watches and movements, and I've been studying the history of watches. And I now have a very respectable collection of watches. They're not, none of them are very expensive. I can't afford like $5,000, $1,000, like 10 grand watches. But they're really, and some of my favorite ones are like a couple of retro Casio. So I'm really enjoying the retro Casio range. I've also got my hands on a couple of hybrid watches, which still use the classical movement, but they connect to your phone via Bluetooth, and then they use the chronographer to track your steps. And because they're still working on a battery, it's not like my smartwatch, which I have to charge every day and it gets really annoying. And I'm wearing it right now, actually. It's a really nice watch. But yeah, so something you don't know about me is I wouldn't say I'm a watch repairer. I'm a watch interior designer.
A hobbyist.
Yes,
More than a hobby. Jesus, you caught me off guard with 400 watches. Jesus, where just from a practical aspect, where the hell do you keep 400 watches?
I mean, if you think about a watch, it's quite small, right? So I bulk buy them off
400
eBay.
Of anything.
Yeah, I bulk buy them off eBay, and they're usually sold as not working or something like that. And to be fair, 60% of them are working, 40% of them aren't working or something like that. But I have reached a point where my wife's like, "Can you get rid of them now?" So I've created a small little vintage store. So the idea around it is actually most of these watches, there is a philosophical element of it. The watches will end up in just like a dump yard somewhere or thrown away. And they're perfectly good watches. Most people don't realize that actually your watches are perfectly good. They just need a clean, a new battery, a bit of love. And it's great. And so I've been selling them for like really cheap, like £10-15 on Vinted. And yeah.
Are you happy for us to stick a link to that in the show notes?
Yeah, I've also got a very respectable following on Instagram. So I don't really have a social media account like on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, things like that. But I created a watch repair account and I'm up to nearly 700 followers now.
Amazing. All right, well, look, if you're interested, if this is tickling your fancy, then I'll put the links to these in the show notes. And I suppose, support Bhav, but also stop watches going to landfill and buy sort of restored watches, I suppose.
Yeah. Or repair or restore your own watches.
Same question for me. Probably sewing. I've always been involved in sewing. I did sewing at, or textiles as it's called, at college. It's been part of my life. My mum and my dad were both in the rag trade and involved in sewing as I was growing up. And I've got myself a vintage bright orange old school sewing machine that I've been making all sorts of bits on, and I haven't been doing it actively over the last couple of years, but I made everything from aprons to bags to cushion covers. I made me and my wife's Christmas stockings for Christmas, and some cushion covers. But I just love it. I love the act of, it's quite scientific. It is a thing that you can get wrong or right. I like that aspect. I think both of us coming from a mathematical background is similar in that way. And you have something to show for it at the end that people can appreciate, which is often something you don't get in this kind of line of work with data. So yeah, sewing machines, making stuff.
I love that. I think that's such a great hobby, and it's one of those ones that's so practical as well. And as you said, you can make gifts out of it, and it's so personalized. So I think in a world of like fast commerce and Amazon and things like that, actually it's nice to have I'm going to start giving my watches as gifts. You've just sparked an idea. I never really thought about giving they just sit in my drawer here and I don't do anything with them, but actually they make wonderful gifts if you revive them. And like, oh Dan, you've inspired me today.
Maybe you could even design a little sort of packaging or like a wrap or some printed kind of parcel paper or something like that just makes it a little kind of like gift. It's like a Bhav special.
Oh, I like that. All right, you've inspired me to think about my, because I do need to get rid of them at some point, because it's my wife's like, no more. You're not ordering anymore now.
Exactly. You need to get rid of them so you can buy some more, right? All right. Thanks for humoring me. Lovely chatting with you, Bhav. And for all of our listeners, we'll be back every 2 weeks now. So I hopefully did a decent enough job introducing it in the intro, which, spoiler, we haven't recorded yet. But the plan is to go on to a fortnightly cadence and no breaks. So we'll see you in a couple of weeks. That's it for this week. Thank you for listening. We'll be back soon with another episode of the Measure Pod. You can subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to this on to make sure you never miss an episode. You can also leave us a review if you can on any of these platforms. We're also over on YouTube if you want to see our lovely faces and our lovely guest faces while we do this as well. Make sure to subscribe to the Measurelab channel to make sure you never miss an episode as they come out. If you want to leave us a review, that would be hugely appreciated. You can do that on most of the podcast applications, or there is a form in the show notes. You can leave feedback directly to me and Bhav. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.